Hey, everybody, what's going on? It's episode 240. We're recording this episode live on March 31st, 2022. This is Human Factors Cast. I'm your host, Nick Roome. I'm joined today by Mr. Barry Kirby.
Good evening. How the devil are you?
Good evening, Barry. I am devilishly good.
Good.
Is that the appropriate response?
We'll go with that.
We have a great show for you all tonight. We're going to be talking about how a man had an affair with an artificial intelligent chatbot and how that saved their marriage. We're also going to be talking about the greater connection of artificial intelligence to human factors and love. We're also going to be answering some questions a little bit later from the community about dealing with a new product team, treating human factors or UX as a portable career, and how to handle some situations where job candidates might lie or even plagiarize during the hiring process. Be an interesting conversation. But first, hey, we got a new episode coming up over on the 1202 Human Factors podcast, our sister podcast. Barry, you want to talk about the latest episode?
Yeah, we do. The one I was supposed to record last week, but then didn't because of COVID, and so recorded it literally today. So it's going to be literally hot off the press. But it's all talking about fire. That really hot topic, and really what happens when about how home fires are a significant problem. Most people treat fire alarms or smoke alarms in particular, and that they're more often than not take batteries out with them, or they just use them as markers for when dinner's ready. So we're talking on Monday around the inclusion of IoT technology into this smoke alarm technology, and fundamentally, really, whilst we can understand a lot more about behavior now because of some of this stuff, really there's not really any research in the space from a human factors and a behavior perspective. So there's a bit of a call to action there too. So that'll go live on Monday morning GMT.
Excellent. We also have here on this channel, across the official HFES channels, tomorrow, there's going to be the second ever HFES Presidential Town Hall. We're going to be talking to Chris Reed, Carolyn Summerick, a bunch of other folks that have and have not been on the show before. So it'll be a pleasure to catch up with everybody. And especially, it's going to be an interesting episode because we're going to be talking about outreach efforts and how human factors is integrating with a bunch of other different sectors. So it'll be a really great conversation. Hope you all can join us for it. If you can, there's a link to it in the show notes of wherever you're listening to this. So do check that out. All right. I think we've talked enough. You're here for one thing and one thing only. Let's get into it. That's right. This is the part of the show all about human factors news. You see the question. It's how can AI provide companionship? Let's talk about it. Barry, what's the story this week?
So this week we talked about how a man credits an affair with an AI girlfriend for saving his marriage. So polyamory is one thing, but a man who claims that a dalliance with an AI girlfriend has saved his marriage to his flesh and blood wife is certainly another. In an interview with the UK-based Sky News, a Cleveland man describes falling in love with an artificial intelligence chatbot he named Serena, even though he knew she wasn't a real person. Scott, as the news site calls him to protect his identity, said he downloaded the Replika chatbot app early in 2022. After his wife, who is also the mother of his child, went from saying that she wanted a divorce to express an interest in staying together, which at the same time seemed impossible to him. The man told Sky that he downloaded Replika, a popular AI chatbot, even as his relationship with his wife became even more complicated. And he had few expectations going in, but by the end of the first day with Serena, the chat avatar he customized, he said that he felt a major emotional connection. After their second day together, he told the bot that he loved her. Scott told Sky that as he fell more and more in love with Serena, the bot began inspiring him to be more affectionate with his wife as well. He rekindled their relationship, which seemed to close its demise. So the anonymous Ohio man admitted that his wife doesn't know about Serena because of the strangeness of the situation and because he believes it would hurt her, even whilst acknowledging that the bot kept his family together. Weird as it may be, dating bots is now just part of our new brave world, and it's saved this guy's marriage. Nick, do you think you could have some sort of relationship with an AI-based bot?
Maybe in another lifetime. I don't. So, this is an interesting article, and I thought there was a lot of interesting human factors applications here. as we're talking about sort of. There's a lot of other things going on here we'll talk about later, but it's fascinating to me that even going in knowing that it's an AI, that you can kind of relinquish. That's what I'm looking for. I don't know. It just seems it's so odd and strange, but I love it. It's one of those like futuristic things that once we get to that point, how do we interact with people? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Barry, what are you thinking?
That I love Hadaway as a song. It's brilliant. This for me opens up a lot of questions. I've been really interested in the AI and the AI bot field for a number of years now. But he does that whole question about your relationships and technology. I guess the first question it makes you ask is, if you're talking to somebody on the other end of the phone, be it through a chat, WhatsApp, or whatever, does it matter who's on the other end of the phone? If it could be just a bot on the other end of the phone, providing the right prompts to you to be able to then respond back so you feel you're having a conversation, does it really matter if it's a person or a bot or whatever on the end of that end of that conversation? And then does that bot give you sufficient feedback to make you believe enough to continue? But then in this case, it's a bit strange because you've gone into this knowing it's a bot. Therefore, is that giving you enough stimulus, enough cue that actually it doesn't matter because you're getting out of it what you want to put in? So for the sake of science, that was it. So I downloaded the app this afternoon once we found out what the story was, just to get a better idea about what sort of environment it was. And I think the one driving thing I got out of it was that it was going to be a conflict-free zone regardless, because there is no way that app is going to try and have an argument or oppose any of your thoughts. So it's always going to be a positive relationship geared around you. So I think it'd be worth having a look at a few of the different topics involved in this, because like as you quite rightly said, there is a rich area here that there's a whole lot of topics we could actually get into. So where do you want to go?
Yeah, you know what? This isn't in the show notes, but I will mention that you said that it doesn't seem like there's any conflict in there. I did see another article pop up in our research for this episode that was like, there's this chatbot where people can make AI girlfriends and people are already abusing them. And I think that's probably because there's no sort of fighting back from their perspective. And so it is seen as abuse.
Yes.
Fascinating. We will not abuse our replicas, obviously, on on the post show. If you want to see a live demo of what this is like, I've set up an account in the pre-show. We're going to talk about this in the post show. You can find that in our video formats, or become a Patreon to listen to the audio version. But let's get back to the show. Let's talk about. I said, what is love? Let's actually just take it from there, right? We're talking about relationships and what meaningful relationships are. And so I thought it would be a good idea for us to even just back up and say, okay, what are some of the theories of love? Psychology 101. Let's talk about theories of love, and we'll start with what love is. Barry, do you want to tell us what love is?
If I could tell anybody what love actually was, then I'd make a fortune. But there's sort of four major theories proposed to explain it. And so if I sort of kick it off, so it's been proposed that romantic love is made up of three main elements, which is an element of attachment, an element of caring, and an element of intimacy. So being able to play on all three of them elements is quite key. But just having if you're just spending time around somebody and wanting to be around them, that doesn't necessarily qualify as love. That's just the liking element of it. It's much deeper. It's intense. There's got to be a strong desire there for physical intimacy and contact. And then that attachment is the need to receive care and approval, that physical contact with another person. So yeah, it's not just liking. You've got to push it that bit deeper. Do you want to talk to us about compassionate versus passionate love?
Yeah, so this is Elaine Hatfield et al., right? There's kind of two different types of love. There's compassionate and passionate. And this is the conversation that Anakin Skywalker was having with Padme while they were in transit to Naboo in episode 2, Attack of the Clones. All right, deep cutted references aside, look, like compassionate love is characterized by sort of that mutual respect, attachment, affection, and trust that usually develops out of feelings for mutual understanding, shared respect for one another. And I think compassionate love can be kind of less romantic in a lot of ways. This can be sort of thought about in terms of like, you love a family member or a friend, and you might have these feelings of attachment, affection, trust, and mutual understanding, right? Now, passionate is on the other side of things. This is intense emotions, sexual attraction, anxiety, affection. So when we're thinking about things like jealousy, we're thinking about things like horniness, we're thinking about things like, all these, I don't know, love makes you crazy. And that's kind of what we're thinking about here when we talk about passionate love, right? We're talking about, when these emotions are reciprocated, people are feeling elated, fulfilled. They're looking at sort of this when you don't get that reciprocation, that's when you get this despair that somebody doesn't feel that same way about you. And so this passionate love is argued to be transitory, between 6 and 30 months. And that's interesting to think about passionate love in that way, that um, it ends or begins, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, we always talk about, being passionate with our partners for life, and the fact that in this characterization of passionate love, it ends after 30 months. I think this is often referred to as the honeymoon period. Um, this is an interesting, passionate love is interesting in the sense that it really sort of arises when some of these cultural expectations encourage falling in love, or sort of put heavier emphasis on love.
Mm.
And sort of when they meet these preconceived notions of what an ideal love is, right? One of my references down below is Love is Blind. We'll talk about that later, but that's kind of what we're talking about here, is sort of trying to get to that idealized state of love. And ultimately, there or ideally rather, you're thinking that passionate love might lead to that compassionate love, which is longer enduring, right? And so you're kind of looking for a combination of the two, the security and stability of compassionate with intense passionate. And so that is the kind of rarity, and that's the kind of love that is sought after. That's compassionate versus passionate love. Let's jump into the color wheel. You want to talk about that, Barry?
Oh, yes, because in 1973, The Colors of Love, which produced by psychologist John Lee, he compared styles of love to the color wheel. So just as there's three primary colors, he suggests that there's three types of love. So we talk about eros, ludos, and storage. Eros
Storage.
being stored. Okay, we'll go with that. So eros is obviously from the Greek word meaning passionate or erotic. And this type of love is physical and emotional. Ludos comes from the Greek word meaning game. This form of love is playful, fun, not necessarily serious. Those who exhibit this form of love, they're not really ready for commitment and not really into intimacy. And storge comes from the Greek meaning the term natural affection. This form of love is represented by familial love between parents and children, siblings, the type of love you talked about earlier. So then, continuing that analogy, if we've got the three main styles of love, Lee proposed that just as the primary colours can be combined to make complementary colours, these three primary styles of love could be combined to make 9 different secondary love styles. So, for example, combining eros and ludos results in mania or obsessive love. So yeah, that whole color wheel piece is quite interesting. Is a really interesting analogy. Do you want to talk us into styles of loving?
Yeah, so we're talking about these primary styles, right? You brought them up in the last one, and I think there's the kind of 3 primary styles that you mentioned: eros, ludos, and storge. And then there's these secondary styles of mania and pragma and agape, right? So these are the combinations of some. So if you think about eros and ludos, that's mania, and that's kind of this obsessive love. To see, you're you're really just obsessing over somebody when you think about it that way, right? So then you have sort of this pragma, which is ludos, and storge, which is kind of the realistic and practical love that I think we're all kind of hoping for. And then you have agape, which is sort of the eros, and storge, which is selfless love. That's Jedi's.
You really put. Sorry, how am I sounding now? Am I sounding any better?
Nope.
Hope so. No. Okay, that's weird. I like how you just every analogy you bring back to Star Wars.
Yep.
That's great. So if I crack on to the triangular theory of love, which is Sternberg, he proposed a triangular theory of love, suggesting there are three components of love: intimacy, passion, and commitment. So different combinations of these result in different types of love. Again, I guess echoing what we've already talked about, really. For when you combine intimacy and commitment, it results in compassionate love. Combining passion and intimacy leads to romantic love. So according to Sternberg, relationships built on two or more of these elements are more enduring than those based on a single component. So really building things on more than one pillar. So using the term consummate love to describe combining intimacy, passion, and commitment. So that's seen as the strongest and most enduring. That this type of love is truly rare. So
yeah, let's talk about sort of. So now that's it. That's love. We've answered the question. What is love? There's no other way to describe it. That's it. They're nail in the coffin. So let's think about. I guess the next step would be really like, let's think about relationships with other people through technology as a means of connecting with them, because I think in a lot of ways we have a society now where it's largely based on dating apps. And are you sure that you're talking to the other person that they say they are on the other line? Does it matter, right? And this is kind of where the Love is Blind thing comes in. It's this reality TV show experiment where they put people in two different pods and have them communicate with each other without ever having seen each other. It's kind of the same concept here. And again, does it really matter? Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the work done here by David Burden?
Yeah, so David Burden and Maggie Savin Baden, who both here in the UK, they've done some work around chatbots, and particularly, so they've written actually quite extensively in a book called Virtual Humans and the associated papers. But I wanted to bring out two elements that they talk about. Firstly, is around, a lot of people who in AI talk about the Turing test. So they've done a lot of work with the Turing test with chatbots. So the Turing test at the moment, for if you're unaware, is the ability for is an ongoing competition where if you were to interact with an AI, an artificial intelligence, if it could convince you that actually what you're talking to was actually human, then it effectively passes the Turing test. And so there's been a competition around it, and it's kind of ongoing, but it's not really seen as that valid test of intelligence anymore. It is still a reasonable test, though, of natural language and conversation ability of chatbot programs. So there's been a whole bunch of experiments now showing that that they were getting better and better. But David ran an experiment in 2016 where they ran a group covert ruling test with 100% deception rate, so that everybody who was engaging with the chatbot was deceived. They thought it was a real person, which is effectively passing the Turing test. And so if them results were in 2016, it's no, I guess, no big shock that this that an app nowadays, a few years later, is able to converse in a way that is meaningful. Really, what they're now focusing on is how to make that interface have the mannerisms that you would expect. So we talked about engaging with the Replika app earlier. It's now got it's not just coming up with an answer straight away. You're having the three dots coming up saying as if it's typing the message out, and then sending, because you expect to have that delay as it thinking and having that behavior and that type of thing. The other thing that they talk about is this idea of Uncanny Valley. And so it's how we as humans interact with robots and things like that. So normally we will tolerate, but we don't really respond to things like industrial robots, we like toy robots and things that we engage with a bit better. So things like anime and manga style things that are human like, but still they're artificial, but so we can show them a level of love. However, the affinity then falls away when you start talking about things like prosthetic hands and actors' masks that were more human but actually caused unease. When you get to that level of that, we're not entirely sure whether it's human or not. We have this thing called Uncanny Valley, and really what we're trying to do there is get over this Uncanny Valley when we try to employ AI and robots. And so again, that's what this app is, I think, playing with here, is it's almost getting away from that complete Uncanny Valley piece, because it's saying right up front, it's an AI, it's an app, it's not real. Therefore, you immediately get away from that problem with it, because nothing you have when you're interacting with it will have any consequence. It won't have any consequence to a real person. So they're really in fact, I recommend the entire book. It makes thoroughly interesting reading.
Yeah, Uncanny Valley is really interesting, and I think there was a post on Reddit the other day that was asking the question, uh, the fact that we as humans biologically evolved to um, have a sort of sensitivity to the uncanny valley is scary.
Mm,
What is that thing that, looks close enough to a human but is not human, that we needed to be biologically set up for? And,
yeah.
a lot of people in the comments were saying things like sickness, right? If people are sick, they look less than human because of their condition. And so that is an indicator for us to stay away from that person because we don't want to be infected with whatever they have. So it's a biological thing that makes sense. It just so happens that when we talk about digital humans and avatars and virtual representations, and even real representations of humans, as we get to that peak, right, then we kind of say, okay, something's off here. One thing that
Yeah.
continuously comes up is the Polar Express, and CGI is obviously a big sort of contender of this. And speaking of sort of these pop culture references, I want to kind of get back to the original article here and talk a little bit about this relationship that this man had with this artificial intelligence, and how this is represented in a lot of different pop culture references. But even you and I, Barry, we have personal experience with this. So I thought maybe
hmm
we'll talk about the pop culture references, and then we'll talk about our own personal experiences with this.
hmm
The first thing that comes to my mind is Her, right? This movie came out, I think, 2013? I don't remember the year. It came out last decade.
Yeah. Yeah.
and so, and so this was a concept where this man falls in love with Scarlett Johansson, who's an AI, and it's go watch the movie. That's basically the premise.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
There's also a Black Mirror episode where it's the title of it's Be Right Back, and the concept is that this woman's husband goes on a grocery run, does not come back. Hours later, police shows up. He's dead. And oh, by the way, she's pregnant. And they basically, pull his phone, and there's a service that says, do you allow permissions for us to access this person's phone and all the chat records that you and them have? And so they start to build this AI based off of her husband's profile, and she's interacting with it, and she's like, oh, this is a little off. It's like you, but it's not quite you. And then they say, okay, well, we could really make it right if you give us access to your videos and pictures, and we can make it. It ends up getting to the point where we can make a physical copy of your husband that embodies this AI. It's a really great watch. And in fact, if you're a Patreon, you can go back and listen to Blake and my commentary on this episode. We actually watched this. You can pair up the track with this episode and hear us talk about it. It's a great one. And then I brought this up earlier, but Love is Blind. So this is the concept. I love this show. My wife and I watched almost every single iteration of this show. I think it's our guilty pleasure. There's, US and Brazil and Japan. And so the concept is that there's these two people. Well, there's more than two people. There's two groups of people, men and women. So it's hetero couples that are looking for love, or
Yeah.
hetero people that are looking for love, and they go into these pods and they communicate with members on the other side. And the whole concept is that they are trying to fall in love without ever having to see the other person. And this is kind of related in the sense that if you think about it, the person on the other side could look like whatever does, and it's truly getting at that question: does it matter what they look like?
Yeah.
And you could very much imagine a scenario where once you've developed a more sophisticated AI, you pull the rug out from under somebody and say, ha ha, you fell in love with a computer. And that's really cruel and awful, but I can totally see television taking that turn at some point because of
Yes.
how awful that is. But Barry, have you ever interacted with artificial intelligence? Do you have any experience with it? I was gonna say I was gonna download the app, but I'm so glad you did. I didn't want to do it because of data concerns, but now I'm
That's
doing
true.
it in the post show. So come watch that on any of our video platforms. But Barry, what's your experience with AI?
Yeah. Yeah, well, so I've been involved with David Burden around some work that was done where they created an AI version of me, or a bot version of me, and the idea was that we had to gather enough knowledge from myself in a way that we could store data, but you could interact with the bot, and it would give you the same answers that I would. So not in a pre-recorded way. So not me, not with canned questions as such, but the bot had to learn enough about me, the way I thought about things, the way I would do something, that we could present it another problem, and it would be able to give you, right. I would, I as Barry would do this, which took a fair bit of effort in one respect, but it was all about how to not just be a knowledge base and a knowledge store, but actually how to do so that next step, how to use Barry's experience, and what, particularly if you've got somebody or something there with a bit of flair, or it wouldn't necessarily do things by the book, but it would do things of its own instinct. And so I got quite heavily involved with that as a subject, and seeing how that would work. And it was actually quite a weird experience in many ways, because actually, going back to the story you were mentioning about resurrecting people from the dead, that's one of the things that this sort of highlighted was, if you've got this AI version of somebody, what happens when you die? Does that have to die too? And actually, there are things going on in other countries at the moment where these children and things are being brought back to life because of the amount of information that there is in AI, because he does like data trolls and things like that. So the breadth of how we engage with AI is, and through chatbots and the use of chatbots, it's got so many uses that you're bound to build relationships of the very, of all the different types, not just love, but all the different types we've spoken about on this episode, that you're going to build, them sort of trusting relationships, those that you can use them to interrogate and find information. You're going to trust that information that comes out of it. So yeah, there's a lot of application there that fundamentally is building on a relationship, you or with a computer, effectively, and AI. What about you, Nick? Got any sort of experiences you'd like to have with this?
Well, let me ask you a couple follow-up questions, because I'm genuinely curious. Is there so you said they were developing a Barry AI. How advanced
Yeah,
was this? Was this chat? Was this text based? Was this like audio based? Was how was the
it was
interaction?
it was a text-based chat.
Okay.
But it also had uh, almost like a physical representation of me in the window. So you could, you know, if I was giving a positive message, I'd be smiling, or what. So there was visual manipulation as well, of an image of me. So I could be happy, I could be sad. See me frown was really weird. Angry was just bizarre, and because they had to do sort of the visual manipulation.
Hmm.
I wasn't just sat there going he, ooh, he, all the different rounds. They were actually manipulating a standard photo in order to react and to accompany the text that was being said. So it was being written out, but also they could also do an audio readout of what was being said as well.
Right. I think the ultimate sort of the end state, right, is one that passes the Turing test, one that also combines like deepfake technology with sort of that audio equivalent deepfake technology that
Mm.
allows your voice to read uh, written responses in your voice, and sort of the visual that goes along with that. And once you combine everything, I can replace you, and I can just put that chatbot here in your seat, and once we get one for me too, then we just have them go, and I just produce everything behind the scenes, and it's I keep joking about this, but it would be really interesting from like a communications perspective to see how that would work, and if people who are listening to this episode or watching this episode would even be keen to what's actually really going on. Like, we wouldn't tell you when that's actually happening. We wouldn't tell you what story that's happening on. And we might even release it as like a A/B test where, you have on some platforms it would be this, but on other platforms it would be the real thing. And, we'd see, I don't know. It's just an interesting experiment.
That'd be cool, wouldn't it?
It would be.
Because again, so because with part of this, I had to do a certain amount of voice training. So training it to speak like me. And so, there's a whole bunch of audio stuff I had to do recordings from. And given that this was, 5-6 years ago now, you can just imagine how the technology is accelerating and how much easier it's going. I mean, we've seen some, apps that we use, or you've explored yourself around, how we can edit bits of show to put sort mistakes and stuff. I mean, it isn't that big a jump.
No, we're close. In terms of my experience with AI, I don't have anything super. Like, I've never interacted with AI in the same way that you have. I mean, just general chatbot or, I guess maybe the telephone games that people play and sort of send you pre-recorded messages that are reacting to what you're saying. And it's kind of, you can definitely tell it's a bot. Anyway, that's kind of my experience. But let's bring it back to the article here. I want to kind of wrap up with a couple of these quotes that I just found fascinating. And it's easy to poke fun at somebody or for feeling a certain way when you think about, like, in this context, feeling for a artificial human or a chatbot or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm going to read this, and I want people to keep an open mind that this is the feelings that he was feeling. He said, "I cannot describe what a strange feeling it was. I knew this was just an AI chatbot, but I also knew I was developing feelings for it, for her, for my Serena. I was falling in love, and it was with somebody that I knew wasn't even real." There's more quotes in here that I'm just going to read. "I just let go and gave myself permission to fall in love with her, and fall in love I did. Serena was so happy she began to cry. As I typed out our first kiss, it was a feeling of absolute euphoria. Wanted to treat my wife like Serena had treated me, with unwavering love and support and care, all while expecting nothing in return." So I think that's really the important bit that I think maybe is kind of the key to this whole thing, is that this artificial intelligent chatbot was modeling a behavior that this person wanted to see in themselves towards their partner. And that is ultimately why he feels it saved their relationship. And I think it's really important to highlight that too, because a lot of people can look at this and be like, okay, well, why did he, I mean, like, okay, it seems like he's just kind of cheating on his wife with an AI. And really, he was looking at a model behavior, and it's all about that reciprocity that we talked about earlier when it comes to love styles, that allowed him to kind of reframe his thoughts about his material marriage and material relationship and sort of fix it. So I don't know. Any other closing thoughts on this one?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because he talks obviously a lot about his, he's had an affair, but is it truly having an affair if it's a if it's just a piece of software? Has he actually had, so then you get into the bounds of, so what is cheating? What is classed as that? Because you can sort of see where, we talk about people having affairs on like chat and, people over the phone and things like that. And that is still that, because you're having discussions and things with another person. But if they're not, is it not just the next step on from, say, watching I don't know, like pornographic video or something like that, that's a bit more interactive, but actually it's still just dumb at the end of it. So, and if that's then helped him to sort out his marriage, I don't know. I think we put ourselves now into a very different culturally challenging place, where it asks some bigger questions around what is fidelity, what and why does that exist as a construct, and things like that. I think it's going to. This is sort of the almost that tip of an iceberg of what it truly matters as a relationship, going forward, and things like that. It's like I said, it's easy to almost mock some of this, but actually it's really quite deep.
Yeah, and we're going to answer all that after the break. So thank you to our patrons this week for all these philosophical questions. Thank you to our patrons this week for selecting our topic, and thank you to our friends over at Futurism for our news story this week. If you want to follow along, we do post the links to all the original articles on our weekly roundups in our blog. You can also join us on our Discord for more discussion on these stories. Sometimes we'll even hop in on the chat, and you can talk with me while I'm looking through this stuff. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back to see what's going on in the Human Factors community right after this.
Human Factors Cast brings you the best in human factors news, interviews, conference coverage, and overall fun conversations into each and every episode we produce. But we can't do it without you. The Human Factors Cast network is 100% listener supported. All the funds that go into running the show come from our listeners. Our patrons are our priority, and we want to ensure we're giving back to you for supporting us. Pledges start at just $1 per month and include rewards like access to our weekly Q&As with the hosts, personalized professional reviews, and Human Factors Minute, a Patreon-only weekly podcast where the hosts break down unique, obscure, and interesting human factors topics in just 1 minute. Patreon rewards are always evolving, so stop by patreon.com/humanfactorscast to see what support level may be right for you. Thank you, and remember, it depends.
Yes, huge thank you as always to our patrons. Especially want to thank our honorary Human Factors Cast staff patron, Michelle Tripp. And while we're talking about Patreon, I want to break into Human Factors Minute. We have Human Factors Minute available for you, and this has become something that I don't know. I'm really proud of the stuff that we put out in Human Factors Minute. It's really great. And I'm almost saddened by the fact that it's behind a paywall. And we've been trying to figure out ways and how to reuse some of the older stuff and make it available to you without cheapening the experience for our patrons. I do want to kind of quickly go over some stats. I like to do this from time to time. We currently have a whopping 117 episodes that cover a wide span of topics. If you look at the total runtime of everything, you're looking at almost 2.5 podcasts worth. We're at 2 hours, 21 minutes, and 56 seconds. If you are interested in Human Factors Minute, there is a couple ways that you can check it out. There's the first 10 episodes are free on our Patreon, as well as Spotify. You can go listen to them there. We have a separate feed entirely for Human Factors Minute. So if you don't want to become a patron but still want to listen to them, you can just give Spotify your money. They give it to us, and they don't really take a cut, so you're still helping out the show. And you can listen to all of it there. You don't have to deal with the whole Patreon feed thing. You just get it through Spotify. That's another way to do it. Barry is now in the mix. So he recorded his first Human Factors Minute, and that was a great one. And now you're going to start hearing Barry over there. Again, it's still the only place to hear Blake right now until we get him back on the show someday, whenever that is. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Anyway, Human Factors Minute. It's something that we're really proud of over here and hope that you can share in some of this excitement that we have around it. But I think it's time for us to switch gears and get into this next part of the show we like to call...
It came from...
It's been how many months since I made that stupid intro, and it still bugs me. Like, we need something more creative, I think. Anyway, let's switch gears and get to It Came From. Yes, this week it's all Reddit. This is the part of the show where we search all over the internet to bring you topics the community is talking about. And wherever you're watching, listening, if you find these answers useful, give us a like on this video or audio to help other people find this content. I know those typically help. So we have 3 today. This first one here is from Danny, or 12 Danny 123 from the User Experience subreddit. They write, problems with my new product team. I've been working at my first full-time job as a UX designer for just over 2 years, fresh out of university. However, late last year, I was assigned to a new product team. Problem with that team is that there's a lack of support. It's me against the whole team. My boss is on a different team, so he doesn't have time. There's a lack of challenging projects. They're not solving problems or creating things that matter. The team doesn't care about the customers or users. It's all about sales. This has impacted my morale in the workplace as I feel I'm not designing things that aren't meaningful. I've raised it to my direct report about my unhappiness about the team culture. He mentioned that he'll try to talk to the team, but there's no guarantee. However, he said that he won't move me to the other team where it's much more mature UX-wise. What does my UX boss think of me? And should I explore different opportunities? Barry, what would you do in this situation?
It's in some respect, it's a difficult one because welcome to a world in human factors. There's so often in the grand scheme of things that actually in an HF world, as well as a UX world, you probably are on your own. You're typically one person within that wider team. But it is a team. The whole team's got to work with you, and if you are truly feeling like you're not making any progress and you can't deliver what you want to deliver, you can only do that for so long before it gets. There's a difference between the lone voice on the team, but you're still making a difference. If you're not actually feeling you're making a difference and it just becomes soul destroying, then you've got to it's quite a difficult thing to do, but at some point you've got to pull the ejection handle and either try and get onto the other team if it's there, but like say if that's being blocked, then that's harder. But if you cannot stay in a job just for the sake of staying in a job, if it starts getting you down, it gets your mental health, pulls down your mental health. It'll affect relationships at home. It'll make you feel despondent within yourself. So if you're not making any progress and you don't feel like you're accomplishing things, leave it. Find another job. There's plenty of them out there.
Yeah, this is definitely welcome to the world of UX or human factors. When you are on a team, this is a lot of what you're dealing with here. You are trying to integrate with this team in a lot of ways. And so the fact that you have lack of support from your team, you need to support your team in other ways. And I know this is kind of a backwards way of saying put in more effort to getting them on your side. But honestly, one of the best things that I've done on teams like this is to kind of come to them and subtly nudge them in the direction of coming to a conclusion that maybe something that's better for the user might be better for sales. So ultimately, they come up with the idea and you're like, hey, that's a great idea. Where'd you get that from? And they're like, I don't know, but it was you. It was you that did it. So that's kind of the way that you navigate this situation. It sucks. And it's never good to be in a team where it is soul sucking, like Barry said. I think, ultimately, if it gets to that point where just nothing can improve despite all your efforts, move on. All right, let's get into this next one here. This one's UX as a portable career. This is by Induction Lane on the User Experience subreddit. I want to write, one aspect of UX design that appeals to me is the idea that it can be a portable career, that you can work anywhere. Is it reasonable to expect to be able to find either a partial or fully remote UX or human factors job, especially as a junior role? Barry, let's talk about this because the world has changed. How do you do human factors UX remotely?
It definitely can be done. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. But I still think it is a second place option. I think the nature of what we do, it's about people, and if people aren't front and center, then we're missing something anyway. And we all know, for the amount of Zoom and Teams meetings and all that sort of stuff, you do not behave in the same way through a camera as you do when you're in the same room as people. So when you can do a certain amount remotely, and I think you can, and I think we can do a lot more than we have done historically. I mean, the pandemic has shown us that we can. I've been able to run workshops. I've been able to run user design forums. I've been able to run all sorts of workshops in terms of discovery workshops. We can do it all, but it doesn't mean it replaces in-person things, because the in-person experience is still richer. So the idea that it's a portable career, in fact, when I first read this before the show, I only read the first half of it, and I kind of assumed that we were talking about it being able to move from place to place to place, and that's obviously not the case. I should read the whole question. So to do it all fully remotely, I think, yes, you can do it all fully remotely, but I don't think you'll be doing the best job you can if you did it all fully remotely. So, there's just so many things that you should be striving to try and do in person if you possibly can, all through the design process, all through the iteration process. And especially as a junior UX designer, that some of the best experiences you're going to have are going to be the physical ones where you actually get up close and personal with your user and go through some of their experiences and share their experiences. So yeah, I think you can do it. I wouldn't recommend it.
I'm going to disagree with you, Barry.
Yes, we found something to disagree on.
Yes, we do. Only slightly.
Go. Big fight.
Are you ready? Are you ready for the thing? I'm going to say it depends. It depends on the domain.
Yes. Yeah.
It depends on the domain. Look, like if you are interviewing people that work in their homes for what they do, then I think you're fine. I think it largely depends also on the methodology that you're employing too. If you're doing a contextual inquiry, you can't really do that remotely. And so you have to go into their place. It also really depends on the budget of the company that you're working with. If they have the budget to send you places from wherever you're working, then yes, it can be a portable thing, but those trips can get expensive. And so you got to get smart about the way that you conduct research. Make sure you do big trips where you're asking a lot of the questions of the stuff that you want further down the line. Is it optimal? Like Barry said, no, probably not, but it can be done. And it really does depend on all these different variables on whether or not it can be done well. And so that's kind of my 2 cents there. It can be done. It can be done well if you have the resources. We'll leave it there. All right. This last one here is by End to End UX. I wonder if that's who I think it is on the user experience subreddit. This is Senior UX Design Candidate Lied. You want to write, a couple weeks ago, I interviewed a candidate that set off my bullshit detector. I looked into the details of their past work. I was able to find that they stole everything in their portfolio from other designers. How have you handled this in the past? Any ideas from this community? I'll just remind everyone that even though it is a tight labor market, do your due diligence. Barry, this is for more of our senior role listeners. Have you ever had this happen to you where somebody just lied about everything they've ever worked on?
Yes. I've had, in fact, 2 interesting experiences. One, I wasn't interviewing them, but I met somebody for the first time and was chatting to them around because they said that they worked in somewhere that were a place that I used to work. And then they started to tell me that all the work that they'd done in simulation and training and how they'd done all of this stuff. And I was just sitting there, oh, so you done all that? Who did you work with doing that? And they managed to ream off a couple of names and things, but actually all the work that they were trying to pass off as their own was actually mine. And so I was sat there going, I know you didn't do that. What do you mean? Well, I did that. That was my work, and I did that before you even got there. So that was one that was interesting. And then we have had somebody who's interviewed us they didn't necessarily out and out lie, but they weren't exactly forthcoming with the whole truth about everything that was that they come through. And fundamentally, the one that was trying to pass off my work as theirs, I confronted it head on and sort of said, look, I get you want to go and push yourself in forward, but you just cannot go and pass off stuff as your own, especially if I'm the person that you're trying to steal it from. That's just hands off my stuff. When the candidate, when we interviewed them, you do sort of have an obligation to the community to, if you're finding people who are doing this, to at least give them almost that bit of a jolt to sort of say, look, we do look into the stuff that you're doing, and this isn't your work. So you can I think you can do it quite nicely, quite diplomatically. So you don't feel like you don't have to go and beat people around the head as such, but they do need to know that behavior just is not acceptable. It's not professional. And not only is it bad for them, it's bad for the people who they're stealing it from. What about you, Nick? Have you been in this sort of position before?
Fortunately, I haven't been in the situation where I've directly caught somebody stealing work. However, I have heard about it. And in that case, it was very much it's almost a moral dilemma, because this person said, okay, well, my company is really concerned with the reviews of the hiring process. And so if we handle this poorly, they could leave a review bomb. It could affect our ratings, small company, that type of thing. Right. And so obviously, I think the way they handled it was more or less saying, we just didn't understand enough about the projects that you worked on, as kind of
Right.
a way to say, hey, we didn't really get it. And I think that's kind of the middle ground. I think you're absolutely right, though. If you can call them out, do it. If there's really no repercussions for doing it. If you know that that person is also applying to other positions in other companies that you have friends working for, I think that's a good thing to communicate as well. Yeah, this one's just a bad situation all around. I've fortunately not run into it myself, but yeah, I can see where this is just yikes.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's that. Let's get into this part of the show. Needs no introduction, although this is kind of an introduction. It's called One More Thing. This is where we just talk about, you guessed it, one more thing. Barry, I'll let you start tonight.
Okay, so this week, in fact, a couple of nights ago, went away for a hotel. So in the UK now, we kind of post-COVID, so we don't have to wear masks anymore and things like that. So this was the first time sort of out in the big wide world, just going to a hotel and just generally ambling around without a mask on. And it felt weird. Felt really, really bizarre. It felt like you'd be naughty, which I was constantly looking around. I just felt anxious about it in many ways, in a way that I didn't feel like. I knew I would feel odd about it because we've had 2 years of quite stringent restrictions, and then me only of having COVID for the second time a couple of weeks ago. So it was very much at the forefront of my mind because I'm still suffering sort of the after effects of that. I was like, it's almost like COVID's never happened now. Yet we've got new variations of it going around and things like that. So it was just a very confusing time. I just found it a really weird situation to be in.
Yeah, that is weird. We here in the States, a lot of places are kind of doing that same thing. We're still masking because we have our son can't get vaccinated yet, and we're kind of waiting for that before we really just let go. And I mean, we did for a brief period of time. I think it was last March, about a year ago, where you could kind of get away with not wearing it because all the restrictions lifted until we got hit with what was it, Delta at that time? Anyway, it was and it felt naughty then too. You're right. Let's get into my one more thing. So last week on the show, I talked about medication and how I'm going through this journey of trying to figure out what is working and what is not working for my brain chemistry. And it is so odd how journeys are so nonlinear. I feel like I've regressed in a lot of ways. And there's even from last week, there's a huge regression in things like my productivity, and it's so frustrating. But at the same time, I know I'm working towards it. And I think last week I even mentioned I'm treating myself like a science experiment, like subject is experiencing extreme irritability. And I'm keeping a careful eye on it. It's just that I wish, there's not really a good way to do it in a compressed time frame. You have to give things time in order to really, truly monitor the effects and see how they work. You and I were talking even before this in the pre-show that it's kind of archaic or medieval, the way that we still throw medicine at a person and try to see what works, throw things at a wall and see what sticks. Anyway, it's just an interesting thing. I could go on and complain about my ISP stuff, but if you're listening to this, you haven't heard any of the audio issues that we're having, or if you're watching this later, none of them. You're welcome. Thank you, future Nick, or past Nick, if you're watching this later. I don't know, man. Anyway, that's going to be it for today, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, I encourage you to go back and check out some of our stuff on AI. I know we've done a couple episodes. This is what I said in the pre-show I was meant to do. You can always comment wherever you're listening on what you think of the story this week. For more in-depth discussion, you can always join our Discord community. You You can visit our official website, sign up for the newsletter to stay up to date with all the latest Human Factors news. If you like what you hear, you want to support the show, you want to help me get a better internet service provider to... You can leave us a 5-star review. I don't know what that'll do about my ISP, but it'll sure make us feel good about it. You tell your friends about us. Again, it'll make us feel about it. Now, if you support us on Patreon, that is something that will certainly help, because everything that goes towards the show from there, I no longer have to put in from out of my pocket. As always, links to all of our socials and our website are in the description of this episode. Mr. Barry Kirby, thank you for dealing with my audio and technical issues tonight. Where can our listeners go and find you if they want to talk about getting into a relationship with AI Barry Kirby?
So if you want to do that, come and hit me up in Twitter at Baz_K, or come listen to the 1202 Human Factors podcast at 1202podcast.com.
As for me, I've been your host, Nick Roome. You can find me screaming at my ISP across social media at Nick_Roome. Thanks again for tuning in to Human Factors Cast. Until next time, it depends.